Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Indexer Office Hours. Today is the 26th of July, and this is IOH 69. So if anyone here is new to Indexer Office Hours, we love participation. And so if you would like to ask any questions or perhaps get involved in the conversation, please do in the stage chat, which is conveniently located in the top right corner of this screen. This will be recorded and will be put onto YouTube. So just bear that in mind in case you don't want to have your voice or image on the interwebs. And so with that, I'm very excited to introduce you guys to a very packed agenda. So as I'd like to do, I'd like to give a shout out to 𝗨𝗂𝗧𝗧𝗧. So this week's episode was 74 with Ahmet, who is the co-founder and CEO of Semiotic Labs. As many of you know, Semiotic Labs is a core developer. And this episode was really interesting because they spoke about their new project called Odious, which is a automated market maker pathfinding algorithm that enables retail and institutional traders to find the best route for their trades. So if any of you are looking to move some money around in crypto, I would highly recommend looking at Odious. If you get a chance, I definitely recommend to check it out, and also the 𝗨𝗂𝗧𝗧 episode. So there you have it. That is the shout out, and with that, I will hand over to Anna for Repo Watch.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our segment Repo Watch. As always, all of the links to release notes and all of the PRs that we'll be talking about will be found in the agenda. Before we start with major blockchain clients, just to remind you that I won't mention any of the latest releases for clients that haven't had a release this week. So please check the agenda. And this week, we only have one release from Aragon, Ethereum block version 2. And this release is 2022-07 or 03 alpha. It contains many fixes, so check the agenda for all of the details. But some of the ones that I want to mention, so fixed regression for alpha versus beta for RPC methods, trace call, and it create access list for historical blocks. So this will be stepping a step forward to not having to support the beta releases anymore. It also sets terminal total difficulty for girly POS transaction and fixes some RPC method for BOR. That's all we have this week. So before I pass it over to Juan, I just want to ask if anyone has had any good or bad experiences with any of the major blockchain clients or the graph stack. And yeah, any experiences anyone wants to share?
With regards to GraphNode, we've at Semiotic have started experimenting with building GraphNode on Alpine Linux. We have a test node that just off-chains a bunch of stuff. So if anyone's experimenting with that right now, just know that there is a regression that causes the GraphNode to throw a segmentation fault. But other than that, it's been just fine.
Is that only Alpine related?
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure it's only Alpine related, and it might be something to do with our build.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Anyone else? Okay, I will take that as a no. Again, for more details, please do check the agenda. Juan, you're up. Also, happy birthday, Juan.
Thanks, Anna. And happy birthday to Pain too. Well, going to Protocol Watch, we have a few things to cover, but I'll be brief. First of all, going to the foreign governance, there are 5 GDR, so request for information about disputes. Please, if you're an indexer, check that it's either it's not you, or if it is you, please respond to the questions. It really helps the dispute process speed up. So yeah, please. Then we also have GAP36, which is Juno indexing for GraphNode. It's based on the Cosmos SDK, so hopefully it's gonna go great. Then going into forum research, we have GAP25 principal protected bonding curves. There are some updates regarding the principal protected bonding curve proposal. We're also exploring a few other curation improvements that would greatly improve upon the principal protected bonding curve idea without having some of the drawdowns for principal protected bonding curves. When they are ready, we will be publishing them. But for now, just know that it's not stale. It's just that we are researching other stuff. Then there was a small comment on the forum post about requiring the most recent POIs to be submitted in order to collect indexing rewards, which is related to multi-blockchain POIs. I think it was a comment from Derek that basically stated that also having the zero GRT vouchers would be beneficial to check that indexers can actually serve queries and not have indexers that are just indexing and not serving queries. Now going into the contract repository, we have a fix, an open PR for a fix to prevent the underflow when subgraphs go under the minimum signal threshold. This is related to one of the, I think, latest GAPs to be deployed to the network, which it was the minimum signal threshold. Thankfully, there's a fix already in the works, so nothing to worry about. Another PR regarding adding account management methods to the GRE. And there are a bunch of closed PRs that we already covered last week, but have now been merged. For the network subgraphs, there's no new releases since last IOH. So I'll be passing it up to Abel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Juan. And again, happy birthday. I hope you enjoy your day. So very excited for this next section. So we've split it into two. The first section is all about the Graph Advocates DAO, and we are lucky to have many members of the DAO in today's call. And in this section, we'll be talking all about, 𝗨𝘀𝗻𝗂 and the members of the DAO will be talking about what the DAO is and what the work that they do, and also how everyone in this community can get involved in the stuff that they do. I think the Advocates DAO is a very important community within the Graph ecosystem, and it would be really beneficial to bring these two communities together, IOH and Graph Advocates DAO. We can definitely help each other out. So I'm very excited for that section. And then after that, we have a few folks in the chat. We have Adam and Simon, who are going to be talking to us about grafting in the decentralized network and sharing their expertise in that particular area. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to 𝗨𝘀𝗻𝗂 to take us into the Graph Advocates section of this conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Abel. First of all, can you guys hear me? And can you see the presentation?
Yes and yes.
Awesome. So before I start, happy birthday, Juan and Payne. So I'm super excited today that I have the opportunity to talk to you guys about the Graph Advocates, the Advocates program, and about the Advocates DAO. And as first thing, we're going to talk about the Graph Advocates program. So the Graph Advocates program is a community-led and community-driven initiative serving as a portal into Web3 for people all across the world. And as advocates, we have the unique opportunity to make important contributions that will directly impact local communities, the Web3 mission, and the future of the Graph ecosystem. So we have been going with this program for a couple of months now, and I would like to first give you an overview of where we're currently at. So within this map, this is an accurate map of where all the Graph Advocates and DAO members are located. And as you can see, we are located all across the world. We are currently at 175 Graph Advocates, including 39 Advocates DAO members. And as you can see, we have people in the US, a lot of people from Europe, people from Africa, people from South America, basically every continent except Antarctica. So maybe we need to branch out a bit there. But on the other continents, we're doing really, really well. So let's continue. So as you can see, together we are building this Advocates program. And in the Graph Advocates, we have multiple roles. So the 6 roles that we can do in the Graph Advocates program are Event Evangelist, Content Creator, Text Translator, Community Care, Technical Teacher, and Web3 Welcomer. And I would like to go through all of them very briefly. And if any of the other advocates or Advocates DAO members want to jump in, please feel free to do so. So the event evangelists are hosting local events, are attending regional events, and are participating online or in person in community events. So that could be the Indexer office hours, but also we had I think 10 graph advocates that were at ETC Paris or at the side events last week. So we are all over the world hosting local events and attending the regional events. Then we have the content creators, and I think these people are really cool because this is completely out of my skill set. They create content about Web3 and the graph, including articles, videos, infographics, memes, or GIFs, and also Twitter threads, Reddit threads, basically everything that you see related to the graph about content. Some of us are creating that. We have text translators that are translating any content about the graph into other languages and are translating the blog post, community documentation, or social posts. Right now, we currently have really strong translator communities in the Spanish language and also to German, Russian. Last week, we had somebody that translated the entire blog about substreams to Russian, so that was really cool to see. And basically every language, but we are currently looking a lot for text translators, so coming back to this later on. We have community care graph advocates, and they post questions to or answers to questions and share educational resources in the Graph Forum, Telegram, Discord, or Reddit. You may notice some of them being in this call, and also you see them being active in the Graph Protocol server, on Reddit, on Telegram, basically everywhere. We have the technical teachers. They teach others how to actively participate and contribute in Web3 or about the graph. For example, showing people how to delegate, showing people how to build subgraphs, and everything else that's technical. They teach them how to do so. So we also give classes, do workshops, all the cool stuff. We have the Web3 welcomers, which is a really cool role. So they accelerate greater education and adoption of Web3 and the graph throughout the world. We see this a lot in combination with the event evangelist, where the event evangelist may host the event, and then the Web3 welcomers come in and attend the event to also spread the word about the graph. This is a role that everybody can do. So I would definitely recommend, if you would like to join the Advocates program, to apply for this role as well. And then we have the recent contributions. So this is a list that over the last few weeks, we have looked at what the advocates did, and I would like to give you a small overview of that. So the Web3 welcomers, they made connections for advocates to speak at upcoming events. The community care, we are gathering and aggregating all the FAQ lists that have been made already. So you would see guys like Stefan or 𝗨𝘀𝗧𝗪𝗀 that have been doing the community care for such a long time. And we are trying to create a FAQ. So new community care members that might not be as knowledgeable or that experience with the graph can immediately jump in and start helping out people in the Graph Protocol server or any other servers. And well, we have all seen these questions like, how do you choose an indexer? How do you delegate? What does the graph do? What do you guys do? So that's something that we would like to gather in an FAQ list, and that's something that we are actively working on. The text translators, as I said before, they are translating all the text. Recently, we've seen blog posts translated to Spanish, to Russian, to Dutch as well. So really cool. The events, we are expecting to have multiple side events about the graph at, for example, Eat Mexico City, and also other events. The technical teachers, currently they're teaching in a lot of channels here in the Graph Protocol server, but we have also seen a lot of workshops being done by advocates that are working for Graphica in the Graphica Discord server, being super active, having weekly workshops. So really cool to see. And the content creation, we've seen that all over the place on Twitter, on Reddit, on Discord. So basically everywhere. So right now, I would like to take the time to talk about what the difference is between graph advocates and the Graph Advocates DAO. So as I said, the graph advocates, everybody is free to apply for that. And then we need a team to kind of look over that advocates program. And that is one of the parts that the Graph Advocates DAO is looking into. So the Graph Advocates DAO is a community governing body that oversees membership contributions of the Graph Advocates program. And since last week, we are also overseeing the community grants. So first of all, we are accepting new advocates, and we fund the advocates program within the Graph Advocates DAO. And the second part, we review grant applications and we fund community grants. So the community grants that we are looking into, they are being published on the Graph Advocates DAO forum. So everybody that's here and everybody that listens to afterwards can join that forum and give their opinion or ask questions to the grantees that are applying for community grants. So I would like for somebody to post that link to the forum so everybody here is able to join that as well. So within the Graph Advocates DAO, we have 3 committees. The operations committee that does process and workflow for the other committees. So they look at where we are stuck and what we still need to do. They are admins of all of the servers and all of the applications that we use within the Graph Advocates DAO. And they also do governance meetings weekly to see what's needed within governance. Then the other 2 committees are the Advocates Committee that look into the initial review of advocate applications, then do interviews for all the new advocates, and they do onboarding. Then afterwards, when the advocates are onboarded, we do mentoring. So we provide feedback and provide knowledge to all of that need some help to start being very efficient in the roles that they decide to do. And then we also do advocate funding. So for example, if somebody is hosting an event as an event evangelist, or they are translating the entire Graph website, they're doing a bunch of work, then they can apply for an advocate reimbursement grant to get some payment for that, or the reimbursement for the event that they host. And then within the grants committee, we look at the grant applications and if a person is applying to be a grad advocate and they're accepted, there are a bunch of benefits to it. So they get some education, they get into the network of the under 175 advocates, they get informed about events, they get recognition in the community, and also some surprises that will come later on. So if you think this is pretty exciting, I would like to do a call to action for everybody here that's not in there yet to join the Advocates DAO Discord server, because if everybody joins with the networks that we have, that will only do a really big push to the Advocates program, and in the end, that will help out everyone. So please join that Advocates DAO Discord server and start contributing. Then within the Advocates program, as I said, one of the benefits is education. We are doing a learning series that is on a continuous basis where multiple times a week somebody comes in and hosts a class or a seminar about a certain topic. And I know that in this call right now, there are a lot of people that are super excited and super motivated about a certain part of the Graph's ecosystem. That could be indexing, that could be substreams, that could be anything related to the Graph. This is not a call to action, and I would like to have a poll with a thumbs up if you'd like to do a learning series of an hour or whatever time you need about a certain topic that you're really excited by within the Graph's ecosystem. Please give a thumbs up to the members of the Advocates DAO can do to planning that learning series, and then the advocates could join that. It would be very beneficial, and I would also love to join some of the learning series that you guys might promote, because some of you guys are so technical and are super excited, and I would love to learn that. So please, if you are interested or excited about a certain topic within the Graph's ecosystem, apply to give one of these learning series, and we will set it up for you. And then the last one, as I said, most of you guys that are here are already super involved within the Graph's ecosystem, and we would love to have you on as Graph advocates. So you could go to the graph.com/ecosystem/advocacy and apply to be a Graph advocate, not only for yourself, but you could also to your friends and your family. And if they are excited about the Graph, then they could also apply to be a Graph advocate. You've seen that map right now. We're at 175, but to get a great outreach within the country, certain areas, apply to become a Graph advocate at the graph.com/ecosystem/advocacy. And that's it for me right now. So I would love to have some Q&A time. If anybody has any questions, me or some of the other Advocates DAO members can jump in. The opportunity.
It's about, I'm wondering, Coulson, if you would be okay to share how much time do you put in both working for as a Graph advocate and in the DAO? Like, is it a full-time job when you commit to it, or is it how's your schedule like, and what's your work commitment like?
Right. Now, that's a great question, Anna. So there are minimum requirements for every role, but if you are efficient at them, I guess it would take 1 or 2 hours every week for every role. So if you take one role of the 6 that I described, it would take you 1 or 2 hours to be an efficient Graph advocate within that role. Now, for me, I'm working full-time in the Advocates DAO, so I'm basically doing every advocate role by default, and I don't really track the time for that. But talking to the advocates and looking at the minimum requirements, for most of them, it's a pretty low time commitment. And as I said, some of us are already working for the Graph a lot here, and maybe some of us aren't, and you should definitely apply to the advocate program. But if you're already working for the Graph, good chance that you're already doing one of these advocate roles, and that it would be great to have you on the advocates program, so you're more involved with the advocates community and people can communicate with you as well. Does that answer your question a little bit?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Coulson. This is Kai with 𝗨𝘀𝗀𝗳𝗂𝗧. So I actually had a question for with regards to your guys' outreach to non-technical people. So as far as people who have no idea what the Graph is, or may not even know what Ethereum is, but work in the Web 2 space, what sort of outreach programs do you guys have available for them?
That's a very great question. So some of the roles like community care or Web3 welcomer, they are super non-technical. Like myself, I'm a non-technical person. So first I started with these roles. I think it would be a great idea to have kind of an onboarding to the Graph that's public. So everybody that might not know anything about it yet could join. That's something that we can definitely look into. But joining the Discord server in the first place, that's a very non-technical thing to do, and from there I think we can help everybody out that's excited about the Graph. Like I don't think we are leaving anybody behind. Very in. So once they join the Discord server, that's basically the only requirement. After that, we will take care of everyone.
Very cool. That's cool work you guys are doing.
Thank you. The cool work you guys are doing as well, by the way.
Thanks.
I had a question. Seeing as we're in IOH and there's a bunch of indexers in today's call, could you list some of the benefits of being an Advocates program member if you're an indexer? And this is, a question for all Advocates, DAO members, and as well as Coulson, if anyone has any thoughts there.
I'd love to take that one. if that's okay with you, Coulson.
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Specifically for indexers, and when we look at where the mainnet's going with being a multi-chain mainnet, there's a lot of connections that the graph needs to make across different chains with other infrastructure providers, and we need to establish ourselves as being a source of reading the blockchain. And so I would say from an indexer's point of view, if you're the type of person that is in other Discord servers and is kind of representing the graph and building those relationships, that would be something that would be pretty qualified as an advocate's role. And it would obviously help the network grow, especially from the technical view of what does this blockchain need in order to implement the graph into their blockchain. Maybe it's not something that's quite as big as or some of these blockchains that we all know about, but if you have a specific chain, then we can look at establishing those.
The program, the DAO, and all things related. All right. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you to Coulson and everyone who's contributed to today's conversation. I think the Advocates Program is a very important program as we've established in the community. And so, thank you so much for sharing. And we hope that as a result of today's conversation, many folks investigate the program and join and share this with the wider community. So, thank you, Coulson.
Thank you for the opportunity, Abel.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much. Okay, wonderful. Well, now we're going to transition into the next part of today's conversation, which, as I mentioned earlier in the call, it is about grafting in the decentralized network. And luckily, we have Adam and Simon to talk to us a bit about that. So I'm going to hand it off to Adam to introduce us to today's topic.
Hey, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear, Adam.
Perfect. Cool. I guess maybe just to start off, it'd be great, I guess, to understand people's level of understanding with grafting. I'm just going to put a little comment in the thing. How familiar are you with? So I'll just put a comment in the chat, and if you react with a 1, on the scale of 1 to 10, I guess with your level of familiarity with grafting as a feature of subgraphs, that would just be really helpful context to see how we're split. Tom added a 2, which I like. I like that, Petco. Cool. So I guess a bit of a balance. More people with no familiarity than with a lot of familiarity. So grafting is essentially a subgraph feature. So it's something that can be specified on the manifest. And when you choose to graft it, essentially what you're doing is you're saying, I would like to start indexing this subgraph using this other existing subgraphs database as my starting point. So let's say you have a subgraph that's indexing, it gets to block 10 million, and then it breaks for whatever reason. You identify what the bug is, but you don't necessarily want to index all of history. Maybe your app is down because your subgraph is broken and has stopped indexing. Grafting is perfect for hotfixing in that kind of situation, because if you identify that it's sort of incremental change and there's nothing actually wrong with the index data to date, you just maybe encountered an event that you hadn't anticipated before, or an order or a situation you hadn't anticipated before in the mapping logic. Grafting could let you say, okay, I'd like to start at block 9 million instead of going back to Genesis, and I'm actually going to start from that point. And so you'd add a couple of lines to the subgraph manifest to essentially point to the IPFS hash of the subgraph you want to index on which you want to graft. And so when you do that, essentially what GraphNode then does is it checks if that other subgraph has been indexed locally. So that's the first check it does. Then also checks the structure of that subgraph's schema, because obviously you can't graft on top of something that's a completely different schema. So it essentially does a compatibility check. If both of those two things pass, then if both of those two things pass, then you can start grafting. So that essentially initially is just a copy paste of the database from the old subgraph up to the relevant block into the new subgraphs tables. Once that is done, essentially then indexing can begin as normal. So that is what grafting is in a nutshell. It's great for those sort of short-term fixes, and I think the one crucial thing to highlight, which I think has been a source of uncertainty in the past, is that grafting is deterministic, which is to say, if two indexers who have been indexing the base subgraph deploy and index a subgraph, they should get exactly the same PIs. There's no sort of trusted element to grafting. It's purely a deterministic feature. So that is a summary of grafting. I think initially when we grafting wasn't a feature which certainly in the documentation that was sort of promoted for use on the network. But it is a feature which works on the network in the circumstances that I guess I outlined. The one obviously failure case is maybe the subgraph developer error if they graft on a subgraph which they can't actually graft on top of. So that's one error which the indexer can't do anything about. But then the situation where that source-based subgraph isn't actually been indexed locally, that is not sort of handled gracefully. Essentially, the deployment would just fail at that point. So the indexer needs to kind of know, and particularly when we see some cases where you have grafts on grafts on grafts, which then is a bit of a gnarly situation if you're coming to index that sort of subsequent final subgraph from scratch. So there's I guess there's an overview of grafting, some of the considerations around the network, some of the current potholes that you can sort of fall into. So I guess I'd pause there to see if Simon would add anything to that overview. I know Eva's here as well. So yeah, and then any questions on grafting, very welcome.
I just posted the docs link on the chat, so if anyone wants to read what Adam was explaining. So yeah, there's the link there.
I just want to add that we tried out grafting on the network, and despite that it's written in the docs that it doesn't work and you shouldn't use grafting on the network, it worked. But I don't know which indexer was involved. I think mine, Soul, tried, and the problem is when you just index it, the grafted version, and you don't have the version from before, you might see a weird error message. I don't remember which one was it, but keep that in. And just not informed, so
In general, if it's a sort of subgraph upgrade type situation where it's a subgraph which you're already allocated towards and that you've been indexing for a while, then you should be in a good spot because, as long as the newly grafted version is upgraded on the one which you're already indexing, then it should work as Simon says. So it should actually help in that hotfix type scenario. But yes, the error handling isn't sufficiently graceful in that it doesn't sort of go and find that subgraph and index it up the relevant block.
And the discussion also said that eventually there will be some tooling That when you just try to index a graph, the subgraph, that you don't have like the one before, that happens automatically. But yeah, for now, you just need to follow the chain manually.
Is there any particular reason why the graph node doesn't automatically just assign it one of the graph nodes to start indexing such a deployment? I know that there's a way to manually add rules using the subgraph option to graph node. I was thinking something like that would be useful to take care of this automatically.
Like, it is mostly going to be applicable to people who have already been indexing those subgraphs rather than folks who are coming to it anew. Obviously, if you like to add that feature where it's sort of added gracefully and handled, like graph nodes, then got to remember that it's only indexing that other subgraph for to stop at some point and then graphed on top of it. So yes, I think there's maybe just a bit of nuance there. Like it's not necessarily a super simple thing to implement, and I think in general we prefer like grafting to be for hot fixes rather than like long-term like subgraphs with longevity, essentially because it just makes a lot of things a bit more opaque when it comes to like reviewing the code that's in a subgraph. If you've got three essentially code bases sitting behind it that you've then got to go through, understand the difference between them, like I think a lot of the work to make indexing faster should hopefully make grafting like less and less important, particularly as then like substreams and those kind of things like come in the future. So I think that's why super like graceful handling of it hasn't been implemented yet.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say this. I really don't like manually intervening into our stack at all. And anything that requires me to do that is a feature that I'm probably not going to use as part of our stack. So if grafting is going to be a feature, and it is a very large value add, but if it's going to be a complete value add, then a little bit more automation behind it. I mean, I understand there's the issue of trying to figure out, well, okay, what part of this subgraph actually failed? Was it a grafted subgraph, or was, what actually happened here? I understand those concerns, but from my perspective, I'm going to opt out of indexing subgraphs that require extensive grafting, especially if I don't have the deployments in there already.
You don't need to rely on many grafted subgraphs. Is like, I think time is better spent getting us to that place as opposed to making the bandage, which is like again, like I say, super effective and important and useful, particularly when things need to be timely. But yeah, it's always I guess a trade-off between investing in the bandage versus trying to do more.
I'm not sure when or what the code base looks like now, but I'm pretty sure that Uniswap was pretty heavy. They probably fall into that category. So I'm not sure if they're aware that this is supposed to be like a hotfix thing. Clear. Uniswap is definitely going to be one that we.
Version that doesn't make sense. Like they would. I mean, like as a subgraph developer, if you want to create a non-grafted version of your subgraph, then you just remove 2 lines of the subgraph YAML, which is the grafting instructions, and then it's out. But I think we will see in the subgraphs that will the hot fixes, as Adam said, but not sure if feature add. I mean, the currently on host service to add a feature to a subgraph, the ones that use grafting are the ones that just sync super slowly, like that they take weeks to sync. Then grafting is kind of a lifesaver, otherwise you cannot really progress with your subgraph, right? So yeah, we need to see which ones on the network then will actually want to use that feature.
Got it.
During grafting, you'll essentially see a sort of matched copy where it essentially goes through the tables, provides like pretty informative like status updates, because it sort of tracks through the tables, tells you how far you've gone, how far you've got to go. Yes, that's the first step. So if it's sort of doubling the data, I guess. It's not pointing to it.
So I actually have one question as well with regards to grafting. Say we were to manually or off-chain the grafted subgraph to try to bring up to speed on something that uses grafting. So how long will it sit there and thrash about whilst the graft base is syncing? Like how does that actually work? How does that mechanism look?
Sorry, what do you mean thrash?
You're poking about in the logs and decide to start off-chaining the graph base.
Yeah.
We identified the subgraph hash. So how does the graph node behave whilst that base is syncing? Say it takes like a week and a half or so.
So I think that initial deployment would just sort of fail, and so then you'd be off-chain syncing the other subgraph, and then once it hits the relevant block, depending on the reason for the grafting, like it may then fail, or it may just keep indexing because they maybe wanted to add a feature or whatever it was. But at that point, you'd then redeploy the other subgraph. It's not sort of like the grafted one isn't sat there like waiting to see, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So for the indexer mainnet, the idea is that always that the grafted subgraph is only a temporary solution until basically it's published again, but without the grafting code, so that we can sync it from scratch. So I'm wondering how this will impact requirements around and stuff like that. Or even imagine the scenario where you want to start serving a subgraph and you don't have anything, you don't have the previous part indexed. Would you then still need to go to syncing the old bit, syncing the new bit, and then when time comes, actually syncing the full subgraph, which kind of seems a waste of resources. So I'm wondering how this stuff will go on mainnet, where Signal plays an important role, especially if the idea is that eventually to replace every grafted subgraph with a non-grafted version.
So I think it's an interesting question, right? Because because from a subgraph developer perspective, depending on like Simon says, I think when subgraph deploys for the first time, when indexes are all going to need to sync something from scratch anyway, it doesn't make sense to use grafting there, and you might as well deploy the clean subgraph. Let's say you then do hit an issue and you do a hotfix, and you've already got a bunch of indexes who've been indexing that first version from Genesis, and they can pretty readily support the graft. From a subgraph developer perspective, I think there is then an interesting challenge, because like you said, does it then make sense to redeploy the fixed one as well and have everyone sync up, let alone the signal concerns that you mentioned? If your app at that point is kind of working in this kind of situation that we're on, say on the hosted service, where we've got grafts on grafts on grafts, it's kind of working and you can keep grafting, but certainly from a network perspective, that then means that all the indexers who are already indexing a subgraph have quite a strong advantage, in that it's more difficult for anyone else to index that subgraph coming in. That might sort of reduce the attractiveness, to Kai's point.
network are actually faster than the hosted service. But I think eventually, if you have much better indexing performance improvements with substreams and everything, then grafting would not be so important anymore.
I guess a question that I'm kind of interested in is the different levels of diligence that folks are doing into subgraphs before they allocate sort of, because obviously grafting, you can see if subgraphs grafted in one of two ways. Either you can check the manifest itself, obviously, or there's actually a subgraph features endpoint on the sort of indexing API on graph node, which, if a subgraph that uses grafting, should return grafting on subgraph features. But are folks mostly sort of manually checking, and people mostly doing it more on sort of signal? I guess have people encountered grafted subgraphs? How have they discovered that? Has it just been when things have errored out? I guess would be questions that I have for the group.
So we've been doing a lot of testing on our indexer allocation optimizer tool, and the way we've encountered them is that they're highly signaled upon for whatever reason. The signal market needs a little bit of work, but that's a whole nother conversation. So a lot of times I've often been saying that our allocation tool right now dredges up some of this sort of stuff. It dredges up the broken subgraphs, the things that shouldn't be signaled on, as well as a lot of grafts. So we encounter it usually after application of recommendations from our indexer allocation optimizer. We'll off-chain it, and then I'll see, it breaks at some particular point. I'll go digging through the logs. That's why it's broken. Blacklist it, move on with life. That's how we've encountered it, and that's how we've generally treated grafts.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. So I guess in your case, as you say, you'll probably continue in the same vein unless GraphNode were to handle it slightly more gracefully.
Correct.
Cool. Conscious of time, Abel, I don't know whether there's anything else, but I guess I think that's covered everything that I had on my list. And any other questions? about grafting?
Yeah, I guess we'll give people a couple more minutes to ask questions, and then we'll try and wrap towards the end. So yeah, any questions? Can see something in the chat from Vincent. Okay.
I could see something like that, I guess, as a happier path. I think that certainly would retain a cleaner set of subgraphs. Simon, I don't know what your take is. So yeah, just to read it out, it's a sort of hotfixed version, which and then a sort of standalone version that can get synced in the background until the subgraph's been synced by a sufficient number of indexes.
So I actually had kind of a dumb question, Adam, with regards to grafted subgraphs. So say you have a bunch of queries come in for the base subgraph, but assume you have everything synced, of course. Say that base was off-chain synced, and the grafted version is allocated to on-chain. Do you gather rewards for both subgraphs, simply the allocation, and also if you get any query fees for the base, the thing that's off-chain, do you collect on those rewards as if it were going through the grafted subgraph?
Sure. So the during the process of grafting, the sort of the base subgraphs data gets sort of just moved across into the sort of the grafted subgraphs tables. So from that perspective, you could then, I mean, you may not want to in case they then graft again on top of that, but you could drop the original tables of the original subgraph. That doesn't, I guess, need to be there anymore because the data's all been copied across. Sometimes the query feeds, it's all still off that same allocated subgraph. The grafted subgraph essentially contains in it the work done, in quote unquote, for the prior subgraph as well. I think the whole thing does also bring up the interesting question of sort of warp syncing and quickly sharing data, or sort of synced subgraph data across indexes, but that's a whole other can of worms. Yes, yeah. Cool. So just I guess specific to answer your question, it's all going to the grafted subgraph, but that is essentially it's one and the same.
Got it. Thanks.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to thank Adam and Simon and everyone else who's contributed to today's conversation. I certainly learned a lot about grafting, so I appreciate all of the insights. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Awesome. Well, as we always do, we're going to wrap up today's conversation with the secret word for the POAP. Last week, I acknowledged that there were some issues because I perhaps maybe mispronounced the word, so I'm going to go ahead and enter the word in and then delete it shortly after once you've all claimed it. So yeah, there we have it. It's in the chat. It's different-dinner-from, all lowercase. So make sure you copy and paste that into the POAP app and claim the POAP. Thank you all for joining today's conversation. It was a very fun one. We covered many topics. I hope you learned something. I hope you had fun. And we are looking forward to hosting you all again next week. So yeah, enjoy the rest of your week, guys, and see you soon.
See you guys. Thanks for a good conversation. And special thanks to Adam and Simon for clearing up some of the stuff on grafting.
Actually, people are probably dropping, but there's a new graph node release coming out very soon. This week, hopefully. Should have mentioned that sooner. See you all soon.
Exciting stuff. What a great way to end. Awesome. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.